اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. السلام عليكم. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. All praises are Allah's, Lord of the worlds, and may His peace and blessings be upon our Master, the Holy Prophet Muhammad, and his pure, immaculate Ahlul Bayt. I too have thoroughly enjoyed the last few nights with a very warm audience, alhamdulillah. Thank you for being very patient with these discussions. I'm happy that there wasn't a Q&A session today. These things don't get solved with Q&As. One has to be patient and read and listen. It takes time. It has to be absorbed slowly. And maybe, yes, I want to thank the committee here for inviting me here, and especially Muhammad Ali Tabatabai, who put a lot of effort in the transport and the tickets. I want to thank him for his time and efforts. And also I want to thank Muhammad Al-Zubaydi, who I was a guest in his house for the last 5 nights, for his hospitality. Okay, tonight inshallah, being the last night, it's going to be quite a long discussion tonight, with your permission. 1.5 to 2 hours maybe. But feel free to leave whenever you want, but do it slowly so it doesn't affect me. Yes. But the last person who leaves, don't switch off the lights. Yes. Yes. I want to discuss the Mi'raj of the Holy Messenger. This is a topic which maybe we've been given only one perspective into what the Mi'raj was. And I want to share with you what the Urafa, especially people like Imam Khomeini, Allama Tabatabai, Ayatollah Hassanzadeh Amuli, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, these people are all saying the same thing in relation to the Mi'raj. But it's different to how we've understood it, maybe. Now there are many traditions in relation to the Mi'raj, the ascension of the Holy Prophet. And in these traditions we see that there are a lot of details in them. A lot of particularities have been mentioned in relation to the ascension of the Holy Prophet. Aminul Islam Tabarsi, in his tafsir of the Quran, he has classified these traditions into 4 different groups. So I'll mention what he says about these groups, and I'll mention his classification, and then we'll go to Al-Mizan and see what Allama Tabatabai says, and we'll take things from there. He says there are some mutawatir traditions in relation to the Mi'raj. There are so many of these traditions that we have yaqeen in relation to the authenticity and the content of these traditions, because there are so many different sources of these for these traditions. And then he gives, for example, the ascension itself. The fact that the ascension has happened, we can allude to and refer to these mutawatir traditions. And so no one can deny that an ascension happened. The Mi'raj did happen. That much is indisputable. But the second class, he says there are some traditions which are not mutawatir. But they don't go against rationality, and they don't go against Quranic principles. But we don't have many of these traditions that... Yes. Right. I explained it. Yes. When I was saying it, I explained that when there are so many of these traditions that it leads to one's certitude, one's certainty, because of the extent of these traditions. There are so many of them that we say, so it must be. But the second group, there are some traditions which aren't mutawatir, i.e. we don't have so many of these traditions that lead us to say it must be true. However, in these traditions, although they're not mutawatir, they don't go against rationality and they don't go against Quranic principles. So there's no need to deny them. You can't say it's impossible for these to happen. And actually, with the help of the Quran and with the help of rationality, one says they are likely. There's no impediment for these to happen. Just because they're not mutawatir, it doesn't mean we can just discard them. The criterion the fuqaha use in ilm al-hadith is as long as it's not against the traditions in relation to one's aqaid, not in fiqh. If it's not against rationality and it's not against the Holy Quran, i.e. it's on a par with rationality, it's on a par with, it's in accordance with Quranic principles, even though they're not mutawatir, we can still accept them. Even though we don't have a lot of these traditions, but we can still accept them. And then Tabarsi gives examples. He says like the tawaf going, the circumambulation or what is it? I can't, the English is a bit, right. Circumambulation, or, yes. What was it, sorry? Circumambulation, yes. That's tawaf in Arabic. This tawaf in the heavens, for example, seeing the prophets, because all the prophets prayed behind the Holy Prophet, the previous prophets, going to heaven, going to hell, all these things, he says it's not against. Tabarsi is saying this. He's giving some masadiq now, some examples of this second group. This second group that we don't have so many of these traditions. But since it doesn't go against the Quran or rationality, he says we can accept them. We don't need to deny them. Such as the Holy Prophet seeing all the prophets, or his going around in tawaf in the heavens. This is acceptable. It doesn't go against the Quran, he says, or rationality. In the third class, he says we have some traditions that do go against indisputable principles of the Quran and of rationality. However, we can interpret them on a manner by discarding the superficial meaning and interpreting it esoterically. We don't accept the prima facie meaning of those traditions because it goes against rationality, it goes against the Quran. But we can still do ta'wil, and that's when we interpret, we discard the superficial meaning and we interpret it in another way. And we have that in the Quran, like Yadullah, the hand of Allah. We don't take it as at the superficial level. We discard the prima facie meaning and we go and interpret it in another way. He says there are some traditions in the Mi'raj we can't accept. It goes against principles, but it doesn't matter. We can interpret it in another way. In his examples of this class of traditions, such as the punishing of the inmates of hell, or the provisions of blessings to the inmates of heaven. In some traditions of Mi'raj, people are being punished in hell right now. Some people are being blessed in heaven right now. He says this can't be because heaven and hell hasn't occurred right now. He says we can't accept the prima facie meaning of these traditions because these people are still here. They're not dead. They're not in hell yet. They're not in heaven yet. This is what Tabarsi is saying. And finally, there are some traditions which he says that the prima facie meaning, the superficial meaning, is discarded, and there's no interpretation that is possible. No ta'wil is even possible now. We can't go around it or explain it in another way. And the examples he gives are those traditions which speak of the Holy Prophet's body being dissected and washed during the Mi'raj. Okay, now that was a classification in Majma'ul Bayan given by Tabarsi. It's a very authoritative book in the world of tafsir, and before Allama Tabatawi's Al-Mizan came, that was the ruling authority. And I think the story goes like this, that he was unconscious for a while and people thought he was dead. So they buried him in the cemetery, but he wasn't dead. And then after being buried, he became conscious. And he made a vow to Allah that were he to come out of this cemetery somehow, he'll write a very good tafsir that history has not seen. And what happens is a thief, because Tabarsi was one of the scholars, and the kafan of the scholars are sometimes expensive. So the thief waited for the cemetery to be night for him to go and at least steal the kafan, so he can then sell it for some money. So he opens up the grave and Tabarsi is awake there, and he forgave the thief and everything. But Tabarsi then went on to write this tafsir. This is how he's narrated it. Okay, so he's given this classification of traditions in relation to the Mi'raj. Allama Tabatawi, for whoever's interested to see what his final say in relation to the Mi'raj is, you have to look at the final 2 paragraphs in Al-Mizan under the verse chapter 17, verse number 1. The final 2 paragraphs, he says everything. Now with your permission, I want to read through it now. وَمَا ذَكَرَهُ مِنَ التَّقْسِيمِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. This is, he's speaking in relation to Tabarsi's classification. He says that which we've said, because he mentions the classification too. That which we've mentioned from Tabarsi and his classification is sound. في محله غير أن غالب ما أورده من الأمثلة للأقسام منظور فيه. However, the examples that Tabarsi gives, the Masadiq, the examples he gives for each of the groups, it's questionable. We accept the classification Tabarsi gives, but when Tabarsi wants to give some examples, those examples are problematic. We can't accept it. But the general guidelines we accept. فَمَا ذَكَرَهُ مِنَ التَّوَافِ وَرُؤْيَةِ الْأَنْبِيَاءِ وَنَحْوِ ذَلِكَ. That which he mentions of tawaf in the heavens and seeing the prophets, which Tabarsi said are physical events, Allama says these are tamathulatun barzakhiyatun aw ruhiyya. These are apparitions, these are visions, barzakhi visions, spiritual visions, those semi-immaterial visions, similar to what we see in our dreams. But the Holy Prophet, it was no dream, the Mi'raj. He was awake. I'm just giving an analogy to understand what visions are. Visions have no physical matter in them. Allama says, in that class where it speaks of doing tawaf in the heavens, where the Prophet sees all the prophets praying behind him, these are not physical events. These are visions. It didn't happen in the physical realm. These are barzakhi visions, a product of the soul of the Holy Messenger. وكذا ما ذكره من حديث شق البطن والغسل تمثل برزخي لا ضير فيه. Also that which was mentioned, the dissection of the body of the Holy Prophet and the washing of the inside of the body of the Holy Prophet, that is also a vision, an apparition, a barzakhi vision, and there's no harm in it. وأحاديث الإسراء مملوءة من ذكر هذا النوع من التمثل. And the traditions of the Isra, of the Mi'raj, are filled with such apparitions. You see, it's very explicit here. All these traditions in relation to the Mi'raj, they're filled with tamathulatun barzakhiyya. Now, just in case one or two of you may still be a bit confused, what are these visions? What are barzakhi visions? Very quickly, if I just go through it. Remember the verse, Lady Maryam alayhi salam, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, in chapter 19. Archangel Gabriel appeared before Lady Maryam. It was a barzakhi angel, semi-immaterial angel Lady Maryam saw, not with the physical eye. Ayatollah Hassan Zara said if we were sitting next to her, we wouldn't have seen that. But Lady Maryam was awake. Whilst awake, she ascended, whilst awake, to immaterial realms, received divine knowledge from Allah, and then converted that knowledge to pictures. The pictures were Archangel Gabriel coming and giving a message. But it was a product of the soul. It wasn't anything happening outside the soul. Those pictures are tamathulat, or visions or apparitions. So the traditions on the Mi'raj are filled with these kinds of tamathulat, كتمثل الدنيا في هيئة مرأة عليها من كل زينة الدنيا. Such as, for example, the traditions where a woman is seen with wearing all forms of adornments, that being the embodiment of the worldly life. The embodiment of the worldly life appeared before the Holy Messenger in the shape of a tamathul, a vision, where there's a woman with all the adornments and embellishments. But it's indicative of that embodiment of the dunya. وتمثل دعوة اليهودية والنصرانية, and the tamathul of the call that the Jew gave to the Holy Prophet, the call that the Christian gave. Because during the Mi'raj, he heard the sound of a Jew calling upon him. He heard the sound of, these sounds were also apparitions. He heard the sound of a Christian calling upon him. Now these are all forms of tamathulat, which are indicating how the call to batil, to falsehood, can arise, and how we have to avoid such calls in this world. But the message came in this form: a Jew calling upon him, a Christian calling upon him. Not that it happened in the physical realm. If Aisha was there in the room, she wouldn't have heard anyone calling upon the Holy Prophet. There were no physical sounds. It's like when we hear the sounds in our dreams, our partner's not listening or can't hear anything. وَمَا شَاهَدَهُ مِنْ أَنْوَاءِ النَّعِيمِ وَالْعَذَابِ لِأَهْلِ الْجَنَّةِ وَالنَّارِ وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ. Other examples of tamathulat is when during the Mi'raj he sees people burning in hell. He sees people being blessed in heaven. These are also all tamathulat of the Holy Messenger. Then Allah continues, ومما يؤيد هذا الذي ذكرناه ما في ألسنة هذا الأخبار. Now, buttressing, supporting that which we have said, is that which is the tone, ألسنة الأخبار, that which is the tone of the traditions. What is that tone of the traditions? من الاختلاف, namely, it's the differences. Differences in what? من الاختلاف في بيان حقيقة واحدة كما في بعضها في صعوده إلى السماء. That when it wants to describe one reality, such as the ascending to the heavens of the Holy Prophet, it does so in different ways. There are a different number of ways that we see described in the traditions, okay? Different number of traditions describing the su'ud, the ascension to the heavens, but in different ways. For example, Bil Buraq, sometimes it's describing the ascension to the heavens with Buraq, the horse, for example, where the Holy Prophet ascended with a horse. Wafi akhara, and in other traditions, that su'ud, that ascension to the heavens, is described as ala janah Jabra'il. The Holy Prophet ascended on the wings of Archangel Gabriel. وفي آخر, in other traditions, بمعراج منصوب على صخرة بيت المقدس إلى السماء, speaks of a ladder from the dome of the rock in Palestine to the heavens. There's a ladder going to the heavens. See, different ways we see mentioned in the traditions describing one reality, and that is the ascension. But it's described in a number of different ways. إلى غير ذلك مما يأثر عليه الباحث المتدبر في خلال هذه الروايات. And other ways too that the diligent researcher will observe in going through the traditions. فهذه, and all these, وأمثالها, and it's like all these traditions, and similar to these traditions, ترشد, guides one to what? إلا أن هذه البيانات موضوعة. All these traditions are assigned على التمثيل أو التمثل. They're all assigned as metaphors or visions and apparitions. Now some people want to translate tamthil as visions and apparitions too, but no, that seems unlikely. He's mentioning tamthil or tamathul. Tamthil are the metaphors, tamathul are the visions, those barzakhi visions. The point is, all these traditions have to be assigned with this meaning. They're either metaphors or they're tamathulat, they're apparitions. ووقوع هذه التمثيلات في ظواهر الكتاب والسنة, and the existence of these metaphors in the Holy Quran and in the traditions of the Ahlul Bayt, مما لا سبيل إلى إنكاره البتة. There's no way of denying them. These exist. These analogies, these metaphors exist, referring to the fact that the reality, the haqiqah, was ascending to this heavens. But it was used in a figurative language, such as he went with a horse, not that there was a horse. He went with a ladder, not that there was a physical ladder going to the heavens. Or on the wing of Jibreel, not that there was a physical wing that he went up. These are just metaphors, he's saying. Or they are visions and apparitions. Okay. Now, Ayatollah Jawadi Amali, he has many books on tafsir, and they're usually compiled by a team based on his lectures and everything. But the lectures he gives in tafsir also can be found on his internet site, and they are his own words. And there's much more luminosity when you read his own words than you read what his team has compiled from his lectures. But on the internet site, in his own words, under chapter 17 verse 1, he says that, because the verse in chapter 17 verse 1, سبحان الذي أسرى بعبده ليلا من المسجد الحرام إلى المسجد الأقصى الذي باركنا حوله لنريه من آياتنا. I think it ends وإنه هو السميع البصير or something. Immaculate is He, is Allah, who carried His servant at night from Masjid al-Haram in Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, which is, there was no mosque at that time. The mosque was to be one day in the future. Some people use this as one of the miracles of the Quran. To Masjid al-Aqsa, which means literally the furthest mosque. The furthest mosque, that area which Allah blessed its surroundings, but He carried His servant لِنُرِيَهُ, to show him of amongst the divine signs. He says, min al-Masjid al-Haram, from Masjid al-Haram, from Mecca to Masjid al-Aqsa, that can be regarded as, well, he says that the Arabic for that journey is called Isra, that being carried away. And that can happen in the physical realm, because Mecca is physical, Masjid al-Aqsa was physical, and there's no impediment to say that that journey was a physical journey. His body too went at a very quick speed. But Mi'raj is that the vertical, not vertical in space, but vertical in rank, is a vertical journey to the heavens. That, he says, there's no need to say that was physical, because the heavens aren't a physical realm. The physical realm is this world. This world has no end. You keep on going high, there's always matter there. There's no end to that. But he says that the Mi'raj, the journey to the heavens, that's called the Mi'raj, and we don't need to bring the physical dimension to that. But traveling from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, yes, there's no impediment to say that was a physical journey. Let's go slowly by slowly, add different perspectives to this as we go on. Then he compares the verse of the Quran which reads, وَلَمَّا جَاءَ مُوسَى لِمِيقَاتِنَا, and when Musa came to our meeting place. Allah is saying this. When Musa came to the meeting place. Here Musa came. In the Mi'raj though, the Holy Prophet was taken. There's a difference between going and being taken. Although there's no time to go into that difference, but it's the difference between Qurb Nawafil and Qurb Fara'id. These are two stations in Irfan. But I don't want to go into this debate now. That takes a lecture in itself. Just to appreciate there's a difference between a prophet going and the prophet being taken. When you're being taken, it's of a higher rank spiritually. Now, Tabarsi in the second group, he says, in his second class, he said, there are some traditions which they don't go against aql, they don't go against principles of the Quran, and therefore we don't have to deny it. Like doing tawaf in the skies, for example, or seeing the prophets. Here, Allama Tabatabai and Ayatollah Jawadi, quoting Allama Tabatabai in his tafsir, says that seeing the Dome of the Rock, Baytul Maqdis, with the physical eye, it's okay. Seeing one is traveling to Masjid al-Aqsa, It's okay, there's no problem with that. As long as one is in the physical realm, there's no problem in seeing things in the physical realm. But then Allah Ta'ala says, but can you explain, what do you mean by seeing the prophets in the physical realm? Here it gets a bit sensitive now, the discussion. What do you mean? Because the tradition says all the prophets prayed behind the Holy Messenger. Where? In Baytul Maqdis, Masjid al-Aqsa, somewhere in Palestine. Now, does history show of such an event? Well, it doesn't, but that doesn't mean it didn't happen. But the point is, what do you mean by seeing the prophets? Because the prophets have passed away. Prophet Ibrahim, he gives the example of Prophet Ibrahim, has passed away. So what do you mean by seeing the physical Prophet Ibrahim? Now here he wants to allude to the fact that if they're going to come to the physical realm again, it's going to be a case of reincarnation. And that's not acceptable in Islam, and I want to discuss reincarnation a bit tonight. We have to be very careful in our aqa'id. If you believe in a ma'ad, because of Allah's justice there has to be a ma'ad, you have to make sure you don't fall into the trap of reincarnation. If you believe in the concept of alam al-dhar, that we were once upon a time before the physical creation, alam al-dhar is a reality, ma'ad is a reality. But how you explain it, if you don't be careful, you may, without knowing, be a believer in reincarnation. See, these things are, one's aqa'id, one has to understand them. There's no taqleed in aqa'id. One has to understand one's aqa'id, everyone to their own capacity. Or for example, Amirul Mu'mineen, in one tradition, Amirul Mu'mineen alayhi salam, he appeared before 40 people at the same time. If you believe they were 40 physical Amirul Mu'mineens, well, that's wrong. It's impossible. How can you have 40 physical people and they're all one person? They all have bodies and spirits of their own. See, Ayatollah Jawadi Amuli, Ayatollah Hassanzada Amuli, they say those 40 who saw Amirul Mu'mineen, they did see Amirul Mu'mineen, but not the physical Amirul Mu'mineen. It was a tamathul. It was a vision of Amirul Mu'mineen they saw. In the same way that Lady Maryam saw the vision of Archangel Gabriel, Amirul Mu'mineen is higher than Archangel Gabriel. He can appear in the barzakhi realms of me and you. An-nazaru ila wajhi Ali ibadatun. Seeing the face of Ali is ibadah. Well, all those munafiqs saw him. Was that ibadah? There's no physical Amirul Mu'mineen anymore. Does it mean that tradition has become extinct? No. We too have the capacity to see Amirul Mu'mineen. But the barzakhi tamathul, a vision of Amirul Mu'mineen. And that's of value to us. If you understand that carefully, you can understand how one benefits from seeing the 12th Imam today, rather than waiting for a physical coming, which may happen in 100,000 years' time. So this reincarnation, we have to be careful. Now, why is reincarnation problematic in Islam? Because imagine Prophet Ibrahim has passed away. The spirit is still there. The spirit of Ibrahim still exists. Now he wants to come back into this realm. First of all, earth can be converted to a human being like Adam alayhi salam. There's no problem there rationally. Under the normal cause and effects of nature that happens, earth can, over many, many years, over many thousands of cause and effects, eventually become a human being. Like the stick of Musa alayhi salam, which became a snake. So for example, the stick, over thousands of years, it may first become part of the earth, then it becomes a plant. A snake comes and consumes the plant, contributes to its sex cells, it procreates, and another snake comes eventually. See, it's possible, but it takes a long time. With miracles, Allah, the same causes and effects have to be preserved. You can't miss a step. The same cause and effects, they still have to be observed. The only thing with miracles, it all occurs instantaneously. But no step is missed, because if you miss a step, it's impossible for the realization to occur. So earth also can be converted to a human being. And earth being converted to a human being, eventually one of the causes in this procedure, in this process, is that of ensoulment. Where at 4 months, where the fetus is evolving, it gives rise to the I, the spirit. The spirit appears after 4 months. That's part of the process. You can't miss that link. Now let's imagine we have Ibrahim alayhi salam, the spirit exists. We want to bring him back. Now it has to go through the common cause and effect. From earth, it has to go until we have a human being called Ibrahim. But when it goes through the natural causes and effects, the law of nature, nothing changes. One of those steps is ensoulment. Now we have 2 spirits. So which one's going to be Ibrahim? This new spirit isn't going to be Ibrahim. Ibrahim's spirit already exists. You can't say this new spirit is that of Ibrahim. That's one problem. If you don't like this problem, you can say, well, no. We can say that the spirit of Ibrahim came from the embryo stage. And then it grew and grew and grew. And then at 4 months, the I arose. If we say that, and that's what reincarnationists say, that if someone dies, they come in the spirit of maybe another animal, another person, through delivery. The problem is that the spirit of Ibrahim already is actual, it exists. It would have to become potential again, there being no Ibrahim. And then becoming actual again, after becoming potential. If that happens, when it becomes actual again, after becoming potential, it can't be the same Ibrahim anymore. Do you know, when you build a sand castle, then you destroy it, then you build it again, it won't be the same anymore. You made the spirit of Ibrahim potential again. There's no Ibrahim anymore. That in itself is problematic, because the spirit is eternal after death. But you've made it now vegetative. You made it the spirit of an embryo. And then said it grew with time, and now we have a spirit of Ibrahim. It's the same Ibrahim. It can't be the same. It's impossible, philosophically. Or you can say, no, there's no need for the spirit of Ibrahim to come from stage 1, at the embryo stage. At 4 months, when the fetus is growing, at 4 months, then the spirit comes in this fetus. One of the problems with that is, again, the spirit of Ibrahim, you've made it potential again. By entering this new body, you've made it potential, and now it grows again and learns and new memories and so on and so forth. You're saying that is going to be the same Ibrahim? No, it can't be. Yes, I mean, sometimes in one person, they may suffer brain damage, and then they forget everything, and they would have to learn everything again. There, the spirit has been crippled because of that brain damage, but it's the same body. In reincarnation, the thing is, they enter a new body. That's the definition of reincarnation. However way you want to look at it, if you believe in all those prophets coming in a physical form, you have to explain this in a way that you don't fall into reincarnation. So Allama Tabu says, the second class of traditions that you're saying, we agree. But this seeing the physical prophets, we need more explanation. It's not a physical seeing. It's a vision. The Holy Prophet had a vision of all the prophets praying behind him. It was a tamathul. It wasn't in the physical realm. It was in the barzakhi realm. And then Ayatollah Jawadi Omli says, one is obliged in such cases to say that these were barzakhi apparitions, the seeing of the prophets, appearing before the Holy Prophet. Now, apparitions, these visions, are of two types. One are ascending apparitions, and some are descending apparitions. Ascending apparitions, ascending visions are tantamount to tajassumul a'mal, embodiment of one's actions. How our actions will be embodied in the succeeding realms of existence. That is, our actions will be embodied as apparitions, as semi-immaterial visions. These are ascending visions. Why are they ascending? Because we're in this realm, we are acting, and our actions here, when we go to a higher realm, not a physically higher realm, but we ascend, those actions are embodied. So, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ يَأْكُلُونَ أَمْوَالَ الْيَتَامَى ظُلْمًا إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. That's an example of ascending apparitions, because it's an example of embodiment of one's actions. Consuming orphans' property wrongfully, it will be embodied as consuming fire in the succeeding realm. These are apparitions of an ascending nature. But we also have apparitions, visions of a descending nature. That, an example of that is فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهَا بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, like Lady Maryam had. Or revelation of the Quran is of this group. The Mi'raj is of this group too, where the Holy Prophet would ascend, receive divine knowledge, and then convert it to a lower semi-immaterial realm. These are descending visions now. Now, if one becomes a recipient to ascending visions, it will be painful, because it's tajassumul a'mal, embodiment of your actions. If your actions were bad, you will burn. It's going to be painful. But if you were to see hell or any other vision through descending apparitions, it won't be painful, because it's not an embodiment of your actions. It's how your soul converted divine knowledge into semi-immaterial pictures. Actually, you'll benefit. Allah is giving you a message. The Mi'raj of the Holy Messenger was a descending tamathul. He ascended, acquired divine knowledge. Divine knowledge, Allah's knowledge, is infinite, eternal. And he had knowledge of everyone's heaven or hell status. Seeing people burning in hell, seeing people being blessed in heaven. But that was a descending apparition. Now, just to give a story from Ayatollah Hasanzadeh Omali, he once had a vision of the descending type. I want to just go through this story here. He says in his memoirs, on the third night of the month of Sha'ban, 1409 after Hijrah, I was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in my house in Qom. He was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in a particular fashion to ascend and receive spirituality and so on and so forth. Although, if I just one marginal point here, sometimes the youth go for these certain du'as and adhkar and invocations and mantras. They want to find these special doors as if there's some magic and abracadabra in Islam. You don't have to. Just go through the invocations that the Ahlul Bayt have given. That's safe. Because other than that, there are some invocations which are specific to certain spiritual states. They're prescribed for certain people. If you experience and if you practice them, it's going to be problematic. You're going to see things which you can't bear. Now, this happened to someone in Iran. And since I know the person well, that's why I'm giving this story. Otherwise I usually don't like giving stories and everything, because we don't know if it's true or not really. We can't base our aqa'id on stories. He went and found this zikr, and he wasn't prepared for it spiritually, and he kept on reciting it. All of a sudden, one day, he had a vision of hell, and he was being taken into hell by two angels. And he was horrified, and he kept on saying, Ya Kareem, Ya Rahim. Eventually the angels let him go, and he came back to his senses. And for 8 years this man was ill. For 8 years he couldn't communicate with anyone. He would break the windows, get the glass, and hit his head with the broken glass. Totally abnormal, because he wasn't ready to see hell. It's not a joke. And he entered this adhkar which he didn't know the effects of. He became so abnormal. He had a wife, a child. The wife had to divorce him, had to get a divorce from him, rightfully, because he was a danger, threat now. He wasn't normal. So the wife went and she took the child. For 8 years he was in the house. No one was safe from him. He would act very haphazardly and randomly. After 8 years, with Allah's help, going to different doctors, medication, he became normal. After 8 years, he just saw hell. That's it. He became normal, and it ended very happily. The wife then returned, and they married again. So it was a good ending. But the point is, one shouldn't go after these things. Only when there are traditions from the Ahlul Bayt which say, read this zikr, for example, 100 times in the morning, at night. Those things are safe. But the specialist parts, which are extrapolated with a certain science, that's not for me and you. Anyway, on the third night of the month of Sha'ban, 1409, I was reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah in my house in Rome. When I reached the verse, وَأَمَّا إِنْ كَانَ مِنَ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ الضَّالِّينَ, and if they are of the fabricators of truth, if they are of the astray ones, in Surah Al-Waqi'ah it's this. فَنُزُلٌ مِّنْ حَمِيمٍ, there'll be a share of boiling water for them. وَتَسْلِيَةُ جَهِيمٍ, entry into hell will happen for them. When Ayatollah came to this verse one night, after reciting Surah Al-Waqi'ah for a number of nights, all of a sudden I realized that the apparition of hell before myself and the temperature of its flames was rising, and there I intuitionally, muhdara. Remember that verse? وَمَا عَمِلَتْ مِنْ خَيْرٍ muhdara. When they see their actions present before them, he saw hell present before him. It wasn't a physical reality. It was an intuitional knowledge, a huduri knowledge, like in our dreams, for example. I suddenly saw and witnessed Allah's verse, and hell is brought into view for one who sees. وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمِ لِمَنْ يَرَى. Hell is brought into view for one who sees. I saw this for myself in reality. Without it, without hell, either making contact with me or harming me. Even though the apparition was realized deep within the perceiver's soul, that which he was seeing was a dimension of the soul, was a perception of the soul. Like when someone is dreaming, it's a product of the soul, it's a perception of the soul. But he was awake. But although he was perceiving hell, and if there was someone next to him, they wouldn't have seen hell, that hell did not burn him. It didn't affect him. He saw hell, he saw the rising temperatures, but it didn't bother him. Why? Because that hell wasn't a product of his actions. It was a product of his ascension, that descending. Oh, thank you very much, brother. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Allah. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. So he saw this help, but it wasn't affecting him, without it either making contact with me or harming me. Okay. After all, apparitions are a form of perception. At that time, two matters became inspired upon me. This is Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh speaking. A mujtahid in Irfan. Yarhamakumullah. He says two matters were inspired upon me. Firstly, were man to purify himself, if man was to purify himself from material and spiritual contaminations, and to preserve one's muraqabah and sincerity, khulus, and to execute righteous actions, it will be possible for one to be the recipient of apparitions of whichever Quranic verse one recites, or whatever event, irrespective of whether or not the event has been realized or not. If you rise spiritually with all these, whichever verse of the Quran happens, you can see it. The story of Musa and the sea, you can see it happening before you. Things which have happened before, you can see it happening before you. Speaks of heaven and hell, you can see it happening before you, present before you, dimension of the soul. Or things which are to occur one day, you cannot see everything. It's a timeless realm. Secondly, the second matter, the apparitions that take place within the perceiver's soul is one thing, whilst their manifestation with the soul is quite another. So one is a manifestation, the embodiment of actions, the other is an apparition of the descending type. The former is not a cause of harm or distress for the perceiver. Apparitions of the descending type, where you ascend, then you convert that knowledge that you've acquired into pictures. That's not going to harm you. Rather, it leads to a joy-granting knowledge for one. Seeing heaven, seeing hell, seeing how people are there, and other verses of the Holy Quran is going to give you joy. The manifestation, however, that ascending type, which is a result of the tajassum al-a'mal, is a cause of harm and chastisement. Okay. So in the story of Lady Maryam, in chapter 19, verse 17, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهُ بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا, that's an example of descending apparitions. She communicated with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and she saw Archangel Gabriel with a certain message. Okay, now I think I have to skip one or two pages with your permission, otherwise it'll be too long. So in this Mi'raj, there's no problem to say that the Mi'raj was bodily. There's no problem in saying that. And there's no problem to say that it was bodily and it involved seeing things. But don't say it's a physical seeing, unless it's in the physical realm. But when it goes to seeing the prophets, yes, the prophets saw the bodies of the prophets. He saw the bodies in heaven and hell in the Mi'raj. But don't say that those bodies were physical. That's where people get confused sometimes. Because we're so absorbed in the physical realm, we interpret religion, everything in religion physically. There's no need for that. So when it comes to seeing the prophets and other things, these were all tamathulat, semi-immaterial, barzakhi visions. Now, there's one tradition, which I'll read very quickly. Someone asked Imam Baqir, how many years separated the Holy Prophet from Prophet Jesus? This was a question asked to Imam Baqir alayhi salam. Now, naturally the answer was around 500 years. But the reason the questioner asked this question was because then he said, so how do you explain the verse in chapter 43, verse 45, وَاسْأَلْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنَ الرُّسُولِ, where Allah says to the Holy Prophet, ask those who we have sent before you amongst the messengers. Now the question is saying, when was the last prophet, Prophet Isa? How many years ago was that? So what does it mean that the Prophet asks Prophet Isa and those before. Man arsalna min qablika min rusulina, amongst the messengers. So it includes Prophet Ibrahim, Prophet Moses, Noah, and so on and so forth. Alayhi wassalam. So the question is saying, the Quran says, ask those prophets. Now he's saying, when was the last prophet? How many years before the Holy Prophet was he? Then the questioner said, to which prophets must he ask this question when the last prophet existed 500 years ago? Then Imam Baqir alayhi salam recited chapter 17 verse 1, Subhanalladhi asra bi'abdihi laylan. He recited the verse and he said, because in the verse it says, لَنُرِيَهُ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا, so that we show the Prophet our signs. Imam Baqir alayhi salam said, one of the signs Allah showed the Prophet in Bayt al-Maqdis, that in Palestine, at Masjid al-Aqsa, was the resurrection of all preceding prophets. Gabriel was ordered to read the adhan and they all executed salat behind the Prophet. After salat ended, the Prophet turned towards them all and said, what do you bear testimony to? And all the prophets said, we believe that there is no deity but Almighty Allah, He has no partners, and that you are His messenger, and this is the allegiance we have given you. You see? Now, but does history record 124,000 prophets in an area of land praying behind the Holy Prophet? And then what does it mean, this resurrection of all the prophets? Does it have to be physical? There's no need to explain it as a physical resurrection. If you do, you're going to encounter problems. But there's no need to deny that there were bodily prophets and they did pray. But take it to a higher realm. لِنُرِيَهُ مِنْ آيَاتِنَا, to show our signs, the celestial signs. In the same way that Ibrahim was shown the celestial dominions of the heavens and earth. It was nothing physical. In the third class of Tabarsi, he said there are some things we can't take and accept the superficial meaning. Therefore we have to interpret it in another way. And that's those traditions of the Mi'raj where people are burning in hell right now. Where people are in heaven right now. Allama Tabarsi, who says this, says we have to interpret this in another way. Those things that the Holy Prophet saw, people being hung upside down, people looking like pigs and so on and so forth, it was just to show what certain characteristics have these attributes to them. They shall be embodied like this, for example. Not that those people are burning in hell right now. Tabarsi was saying this. Allama Tabatabai is saying there's no need to discard the prima facie meaning of these traditions of Mi'raj. We can accept it. People are in hell or heaven right now. Those who consume the orphans' property wrongfully, إِنَّمَا يَأْكُلُونَ فِي بُطُونِهِمْ نَارًا. Right now they're ingesting fire in their bellies. It's happening right now. Hell is happening right now. Hell is a product of one's actions. And the Prophet is saying it. There's no need to say it's not happening because the people are alive now, there's no heaven and hell. No. Heaven and hell, it's happening right now. It's not going to start later. And we can understand that from explicit verses of the Holy Quran. That was one of them. Another one, chapter 29, verse 54. وَإِنَّ جَهَنَّمَ لَمُحِيطَةٌ بِالْكَافِرِينَ. It's surrounding the kuffar right now. They're in hell. Right now, لَمُحِيطَةٌ. It's a present participle. It's right now it's happening. So there's no need in that third class to discard the superficial external meaning of those. No, it's correct. Right now, they're in hell as a result of their sins. And if they do good actions, right now they're in heaven, but they can't see it. That's the only thing. In any case, there's no need to reinterpret those classes of traditions of the Mi'raj. 179, أولئك كالأنعام بل هم أضل. The Quran is saying, you have a problem with the traditions of the Mi'raj, that some people are pigs. The Quran is saying some people who are living right now, they are like animals. They're like cattle. It doesn't say they are cattle, because if you say they are cattle, that's not going to be any suffering for them. There won't be any pain. Pain is when you know you're a human being, but you've embodied, you no longer embodied yourself with a human phenotype, you're that of a pig now. That's going to be a source of distress. Not that you become a pig. No, you're still you. The Quran is saying these people are like animals, even worse than animals. So, is heaven and hell? It's happening right now. Right now they're animals. But only after physical death they'll see it. They just don't see it now. But heaven and hell exist right now. Now, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh writes, people hear of the Mi'raj of the Holy Messenger and read of the traditions on the Mi'raj. However, we have not attained to its secrets and have not yet grasped the idea that these traditions are depicting the Holy Messenger's spiritual journey, and all that is described in this celestial and heavenly journey is on a par with the story of man and his existential states and stages in the eternal realms that succeed this physical realm, states which emanate from this realm, because ad-dunya mazra'atul akhirah. Elsewhere, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says the Mi'raj of the Prophet was spiritual and bodily. But don't forget, bodily doesn't mean physical. As Ibn Arabi has mentioned in his Futuhat, that innal Isra kana bijismihi, it was with the body of the Prophet. And we'll explain this body bit a bit more later. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh divides the journey into three. He says, first of all, the I, man. Okay, man. This I, first person singular, is an extended creature with an earthly dimension and many semi-immaterial dimensions. It's all part of who we are. That earthly dimension is us, that barzakhi dimension is us, that more immaterial dimensions is us. It's all you. You're a multi-dimensional creature. But we're usually absorbed in the worldly life. In our dreams we have some access to more immaterial realms. This physical body is us too. Barzakh is a dimension of us too. It's not that this physical body is just merely a tool, a vehicle. Actually, the physical body too is a subtle manifestation of the soul. This soul, when it was an embryo, it was keep on growing. As it was evolving and growing, it kept on manifesting more and more physical parts. These physical parts arose as a result of the evolution of the spirit. It's not as if we are the spirit and this body is just something extra, it's just a tool and it's totally separate to us. Because if that was the case, maybe, this is just my own understanding, don't panic, it may be totally wrong and I haven't heard it anywhere, so I'm just giving you some ideas here. So, well, Sadra does say, Mullah Sadra, that this physical body is a subtle manifestation of the spirit. That he says. But this next part he doesn't. Because if it wasn't a manifestation of the I, of the spirit, and it was something totally different to us, it was mutually exclusive to us, it was only a tool, then maybe there was no need to say that handshaking, skin-to-skin contact is haram. Why is handshaking the opposite sex? For example, man and woman, it's not allowed to shake, making skin-to-skin contact. If one is wearing gloves, that's a different matter. But skin-to-skin contact isn't allowed. Why do women have to cover the physical hair. See, these things, it's not a case of that physical hair is mutually exclusive to the woman, or the hands are just mere tools mutually exclusive to us. These are subtle manifestations of the soul. These are signs of chastity, that you're covering your soul when you cover the hair. You can't touch skin-to-skin contact with non-mahrams, because that's a sign of chastity. You don't want to contaminate the soul. It's all related. Now for women, the hijab is something they have to cover, certain parts of the body. For men, the hijab is the beard. For some secrets of the Sharia, that the man has to cover this area of skin. Some men have good beards, some men have weak beards. Some women wear the hijab properly, some we don't want to judge anyone. But man also, the man has a hijab. That hijab is wearing a beard. That area has to be covered. And for women in the house, they can take off the hijab. But the man can't. But the point is, there's these secrets here. That why should man cover that? It's all to do with the physical body is a subtle manifestation of the soul. It's covering the soul. It's a sign of chastity. Anyway, so here we said the heavens are dimensions of the soul. The Holy Prophet, with his great ascension, he went through the heavens. But it was a journey of the soul. It wasn't outside him. He didn't go to a physical place. It was all tamathulat. It was a mithali reality and nothing to do with the physical realm. Inna salat mi'rajul mu'min. The salat is the believer's mi'raj. How many of you during salat suddenly had a physical ascension? No, but the urafa, the true Sufis, during salat they ascend spiritually, bodily, barzakhi tamathul. But the physical body is here, because heavens, all succeeding realms of existence are immaterial. Only this realm is physical. Then we have traditions where Aisha was with the Holy Prophet. When the Holy Prophet made the Mi'raj from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, he went to the heavens, came back to where he was. Some traditions say that Aisha was there. Now Aisha thought the Holy Prophet was dreaming. That's the Sunni line. They say the Mi'raj was a dream. We don't believe it was a dream. The Prophet was awake. And the physical body was there sitting. But he ascended. Now from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa, it could have happened very quickly. It didn't need to take 10 or 15 minutes so that Aisha said, oh, where's the Holy Prophet here? That's why it could happen so quickly that she never saw his absence. Or some traditions say when the Holy Prophet returned, the seat where he was sitting before the Mi'raj was still warm. Some say the doorknob was still moving. So this happened very quickly. Now this happening very quickly has led to two different positions amongst the Urafa. Some even say that from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa there was no physical movement. The Holy Prophet was always sitting where he was in Mecca. Ibn Sina has that belief. Even there he says, although there's no impediment to say in that physical realm, the Holy Prophet did, but he said that's not the case. It was all a spiritual journey. It was all a tamathul. And then when he came in contact, when again came to this physical realm, conscious of this physical realm, yes, the seat was still warm, the door was still knocking. Some people believe that. But as I say, there's no need to insist that it wasn't physical, this horizontal journey. One of the scholars in Iran, one of his students, was teaching us, a few people in the class once. And then the student said, switch off the digital recorder for a minute. So we switched off the digital recorder, and he gave a story of an Arif in Iran. And this is one of those very private stories. I can't give the name, but I can at least give you the story. He said this Arif explains that once he was sitting in his living room, and then these entities came. The Arif said that these entities were physical. Then these entities took me. I was silent though. I didn't ask who they were or anything. They took me around the earth clockwise once, and then around the earth anti-clockwise once. And then I was seeing many things, learning many things, what was happening on earth. Then they brought me to my room, but this Arif was intelligent. He saw what the time was before going. And then he saw the clock, what the time was. It took 2.5 hours. All that journeying. So here it's possible. The Holy Prophet could have gone that physical journey within a second, within a moment, less than a second. There's no need to reject that from Masjid al-Haram to Masjid al-Aqsa it wasn't physical. But many ulama don't accept it was physical. Even that journey, even though it's rationally possible that it was physical. Now Ibn Sina, in his treatise on the Mi'raj, he writes, I enjoin you to prevent those who are unworthy and ignorant from attaining to these truths. Because his Risala on the Mi'raj is just totally out of this world. It's just something very difficult. He goes against even the common understanding of the Mi'raj that the Urafa have. And I wanted to once share this in my Tabligh experiences, but my Ustad, he didn't allow it. Not that it's what wajib for me not to say it, but he said it's not in the best interest, and he gave me this part of it. He said, tell this to the people. He said, I enjoin you, Ibn Sina is saying, to prevent those who are unworthy and ignorant from attaining to these truths. After all, miserliness before such people in relation to such truths counts as one of the most important of the wajibat. It's wajib to be miserly in relation to the ignorant. Don't tell them anything. As the Holy Messenger has said, لا تطرح الجواهر تحت أقدام الخنازير. Don't put your gems under the feet of pigs. Pigs being that embodiment of pure ignorance. Don't give your gems to those who are ignorant. Give it to those who are worthy of understanding. Not those who don't have that capacity to understand or don't want to understand. Now the Urafa have also said, this has nothing to do with Ibn Sina, they've said, make immune your secrets from the vicious. Your secret is your blood. You have to keep it. If it comes out, some people may even kill you. Some people sometimes, they're against the Urafa. They don't understand what they're saying. Remember the tradition, Lo alima Abu Dhar ma fi qalb Salman. Some people can't take it. Now, Haji Sabzawari, very important philosopher and Arif of 150 years ago, he's written marginal notes in Mullah Sadra's Asfar. There, in one of the notes, he says, and we're coming to the end, only I think 10 more minutes, acknowledge that the bodily Mi'raj and the bodily Ma'ad, resurrection, are at evens with one another, both feeding from the same bosom, sharing or being equivalent with respect to their rulings. So what applies to one will apply to the other. What applies to Mi'raj will apply to Ma'ad, resurrection. So he is saying, since Mi'raj is something, all tamathulat, semi-immaterial and so forth, Ma'ad too, from Barzakh onwards, it's all tamathulat, it's all visions and apparitions. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh, commenting on this point of Haji Sabzawari, he says, in the same way, the bodily ma'ad, the bodily, not physical, the bodily ma'ad is at evens with tajassum al-a'mal. In the same way that tajassum al-a'mal is semi-immaterial, when you're sinning and you're consuming fire in your belly, you're not sensing that fire. It can't be something physical. Otherwise, when you were sinning, you would feel that physical fire. So he says the bodily ma'ad is at evens with tajassum al-a'mal. In the same way tajassum al-a'mal is semi-immaterial, ma'ad, that bodily ma'ad, is also semi-immaterial. Then Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh adds, the meaning of jism, body, here is the realization of a thing and its establishment and its becoming actual. Now this is important. These are now philosophical terms. In the traditions, nowhere in the traditions does it speak of jismani. But there is a body in Ma'ad, there is a body in Mi'raj. Resurrection, Qiyamah, there's going to be bodies. It's going to be this body too. When we say this body doesn't mean this physical body. The soul is always in association with a substance which isn't physical. It's called the jism. That jism in this physical realm takes a physical outlook to it. This same jism, when it's becoming more perfect, when it's becoming more established, ascending to the next realm of existence, barzakh onwards, it's still the same body, but it's semi-immaterial. The body, its quality, it depends on the realm of existence which the I is residing in. Then, Ayatollah Hassan Zadeh says, in the traditions, the Holy Messenger speaks of seeing Adam alayhi salam in the first heaven, seeing Yahya and Isa in the second heaven, seeing Yusuf, Idris, Harun, Moses, Ibrahim. He says, by heavens, when those traditions of the Mi'raj say he saw these prophets in that degree of heaven, in that degree of heaven, by heavens, the planets and the stars are not meant. Rather, the heavenly dimension is meant. And this witnessing of the signs were all within the soul of the Holy Prophet. In the same way as chapter 19, 17, فَتَمَثَّلَ لَهُ بَشَرًا سَوِيًّا. Well, Lady Maryam saw Archangel Gabriel, a dimension of the soul. You can see prophets too. We also can see prophets. النَّذَرُ إِلَى وَجْهِ عَلِي إِبَادَةٌ. We can also see the 12th Imam. We can see previous prophets too. وَاسْأَلْ مَنْ أَرْسَلْنَا مِنْ قَبْلِكَ مِنْ رُسُلِنَا applies to us also. Ask those prophets before you. We have that capacity. And finally, Imam Khomeini's view on the Mi'raj. Imam Khomeini, we don't have people like that. It's, I don't want to be biased or anything, but the matter of the fact was this man was a mujtahid of a very, very high degree in fiqh, usul, akhlaq, irfan, all these in his 20s. Some people may not agree with the Islamic Revolution of Iran, and for whatever reason, and there's no need to panic or speak against them. One has to be patient, and there's no need to attack people for that. But don't let that, even if you don't agree with things that have happened, don't let that sidetrack you from his knowledge. That's the least you can do. Okay. Now he writes, Allah in his entirety, Allah, all his attributes and everything, transcends in all things. And his relation to all things, whatever is one and equal. As is said in chapter 43, verse 84, وَهُوَ الَّذِي فِي السَّمَاءِ إِلَهٌ وَفِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَهٌ. It's He, Allah, who is Allah in the heavens, is Allah in the earth. Imam is saying Allah in his entirety transcends in all things. This microphone, this cup, this book, sun, the moon, they're all manifestations of Allah's attributes. All of Allah's attributes exist in whatever one thing you mention. It doesn't mean that Allah is in something, no. Allah is that existence qua existence. Everything emanates from it. But Allah in His entirety transcends in this cup, in water, in the sun, in the moon. In the same way that Allah transcends in a cup, in the same way He transcends in the sun, in the same way He transcends in the moon. There's no gradation, there's no spectrum of difference in relation to Allah's existence in things. Whatever is a manifestation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing is Allah free. Huwal awwalu wal akhiru wal dhahiru wal batin. So why are things different? If it's the same Allah in its entirety, manifesting in its entirety in different things, why do things differ in their manifestation? Because due to the difference of the recipient, it manifests Allah differently. This cup is one qabil, recipient of a particular form, which can only manifest all those attributes in a particular fashion. The sun can manifest Allah more. Animals can manifest Allah more than the sun. Humans can maximally manifest all of Allah's attributes. We were created in His image. We have that capacity. There's no gradation in existence that this thing has some of Allah's attributes but not others, that has some of Allah's attributes but not others, and that has some of Allah's attributes and not. No. There's no gradation in existence. There's no tashkik in wujud. But tashkik, there's gradation in manifestation, in zuhur. Why is there tashkik and gradation and differences of scales in manifestation? Because everything has a certain degree of recipients. It can only manifest so much of all of Allah's attributes. Although that's nothing to do with Mi'raj, but it's part of what he was saying. And then he says, and as the tradition states, وَلَوْ دَلَّيْتُمْ بِحَبْلٍ إِلَى الْأَرْضِ السُّفْلَى لَحَبِتْتُمْ عَلَى اللَّهِ. If you were to descend into earth, down into earth, with a rope, you will descend upon Allah. Meaning Allah is everywhere. There's no way that's Allah free. هُوَ الَّذِي فِي السَّمَاءِ إِلَهٌ وَفِي الْأَرْضِ إِلَهٌ. Is Allah in the heavens, Allah in the earth. Nowhere is Allah free. And it is based on this, Imam Khomeini says, that the tradition states, Inna mi'raja Yunusa. Verily the mi'raj of Prophet Yunus, Jonah, kana fi batnil hut. It happened inside of the fish. Kama inna mi'raja nabiyyana kana bil uruj ila fawq al-lahut. In the same way that our Prophet ascended to the purely immaterial realms. There's something very important here in this tradition. There's something Imam wants to point to, incredibly important. I'm not going to give it away. I'm not going to say explicitly what he wants to say here. The same way that Yunus had the Mi'raj in the stomach of the fish, our Prophet also had Mi'raj to metaphysical, immaterial realms. The Mi'raj was the same. Then Imam says, note that what is meant by Mi'raj, Imam is saying this, Imam Khomeini, is not the Prophet seeing physical things, as was the case in the seeing of the dominions of the heavens and the earth by Prophet Ibrahim. It wasn't Prophet Ibrahim seeing physical things. After all, there's not much significance in relation to the physical realm or physical planets for the Prophet to have a mi'raj in order just to see such things, or for such a thing to be seen by Prophet Ibrahim. There's no value in that. All these spacemen going up, do they become spiritual? Is that of any value? Rather, Imam says, seeing or undergoing the mi'raj is for seeing the immaterial realms. أَعِنْدَهُ عِلْمُ الْغَيْبِ فَهُوَ يَرَى. Does he see the knowledge of the unseen to qualify as seeing, to qualify as one who sees? This seeing has benefit. Some think, Imam Khomeini says, that the buraq was a simple horse, like the horses we ride upon, and that the Prophet rode upon such a horse, because history doesn't record such a physical horse. So some people think that the buraq was a simple horse, like the horses we ride upon, and that the Prophet rode upon such a horse, and then a physical Jibreel held onto the reins of the horse. No, buraq too was an immaterial existent, the tamathul. Such beliefs and conceptions bound by physical matter in relation to the mi'raj and its particularities are not sound. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله.